U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.
Welcome everyone tonight. We'll go straight to our state and federal representatives. Ms. Melissa, Dave, have any comments?
Here tonight because he's out at the Waste Management Conference, perhaps with some of us. I believe he's on an airplane now, so hopefully see him tomorrow, but I'll go ahead and keep us on schedule too.
Good deal. Christoph? Good deal. Item number 2, comment, or number 3, presentation, a reuse of historical preservation at ETTP. We have Mr. Steve Cook here tonight. The issue group was Shields, Shoemaker, and Tapp.
Steve Cook works for the DOE Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management, supporting East Tennessee Technical Park I knew I'm not going to do this. Say it right. Reindustrialization and historic preservation efforts. Steve has worked for the Department of Energy for more than 25 years, primarily in program and project management roles, supporting waste management, soil and groundwater assessment, and technical development. He was educated at Tennessee Tech University and the University of Tennessee, earning a bachelor's degree in science and a master's in science degrees in mechanical engineering.
Mr. Cook.
Good to be with you guys this evening. Want to speak with you all about where we are at East Tennessee Technology Park on historic preservation and reindustrialization. There, thanks, Melissa. Interpreting the past and planning the future. This building here is a K-25, former K-25 building, a photo of it from when it was operational. And that building has a lot of historical significance. The scale of the building itself is impressive, as most of you are aware. It was an enormous building, a quarter mile long on each side of the U there. It was the largest building in the world at the time it was built, 65 foot tall. It was built in 16 months, which is unfathomable by historic standards, past or present. And that was because of the urgency of the time frame which it was built. These are the historic events that this facility was connected to. And you can see that in the late 30s, President Roosevelt was concerned that Germany was developing an atomic bomb and set up an advisory committee on uranium. He funded research at Columbia University. The Manhattan Engineering District was established in New York City. It was moved to Tennessee. And the gaseous diffusion process that was being researched at Columbia University ultimately was employed in this K-25 facility. In 1945, the little boy bomb shown right there, it's about 10 foot long and about 5 tons, was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. That helped end the war. And the uranium that went in that bomb came from the K-25 facility as well as Y-12. And so this building has historical significance. Under the National Historic Preservation Act, when we are having impacts on properties that have historic significance, we have to seek to mitigate the impacts of the loss of those properties. In the case of the K-25 building, because of deterioration of the structure itself and because of contamination, the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management had to demolish the building in its entirety with the exception of the slab. And so under the National Historic Preservation Act, we entered into negotiations with consulting parties and came up with some mitigative actions to mitigate the loss of that building. These are the consulting parties that we worked with, 12 in total. And many things have been accomplished through that process. Artifacts have been collected. Historic American engineering record documentation for several of the facilities has been developed. Most recently, we opened the K-25 History Center on the second floor of the City of Oak Ridge Fire Station, which is located approximately in the center of the site. You can see just to the south of the footprint of the former building there. Again, we opened this facility on February 27th. Really a good story of partnership with the City of Oak Ridge, who owns the building, with the National Park Service, who was involved in all the reviews for the exhibits and who has put together the first exhibit in the Changing Gallery portion of this History Center, and a good partnership with the DOE Office of Science. They operate the American Museum of Science and Energy here in town, and by partnering with them, we're able to leverage the resources. You can see in some of these photos that that's the actual bell from the Wheat Community School. This is a full-scale model of the little boy bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. There is a mock-up of a control room from the K-25 building. This is looking north onto the preservation footprint, it's called. All of the area that's kind of shown as tan there is the slab, or what remains of the slab, what was the slab, I should say, and for the portions of the slab that have been removed. And that part of the K-25 site is actually part of the Manhattan Project National Historic Park since 2015. So where do we go from here at the East Tennessee Technology Park Heritage Center? Well, we envision a future that incorporates historic preservation, but also has industrial space for jobs and provides space for conservation. In the late 1990s, the Defense Authorization Act of 1998 and the Regulation 10 CFR 770 that came out of that gave DOE latitude to transfer property for redevelopment at former defense nuclear facilities that have been closed, gave us special authorities that facilitates the transfer of that property, and we're using those to transfer property at this site for industrial development. This is kind of stepping back a bit to a bigger picture view, and looks like I've lost my light there, but this is looking at the Heritage Center that we were just talking about and the surrounding area, the Horizon Center, and you can see the mix of the purple, which is industrial development, areas planned for industrial development, and the olive and the darker shades of green, which are areas that are currently set aside for conservation or planned to be set aside for conservation. Then right there in the center of the Heritage Center, the tan area is the portion of the site that is part of the Manhattan Project National Historic Park. Looks like we've lost the pointer. Okay. Thanks, Shelley. So how do we get from here to there? It starts with building demolition, removing the hundreds of structures that existed on that site. We're close to completing that process. And then there's soil and groundwater remedial actions to be done, and then transfer of the property. So you can see a lot of progress. These are a time series set of slides showing the progress in building demolition from 2017. The green buildings are those that were removed as of 2017. And the yellow and orange are in various stages in preparation for demolition. You see the progress to 2018, and then most recently this past year, 2019, and we're left with just a couple, really two pretty significant facilities remaining to be removed, the K1200 complex and the K1600 complex, and then a few smaller buildings, and that all is expected to be completed this summer. For soil remediation, the site is divided up into two zones, Zone 1 and Zone 2. Zone 1 is about 1,200 acres. Zone 2 is approximately 800 acres. And you can see this shows the progress on soil remediation. A lot of progress has been made. All of the green areas have been cleared. Soil remediation work is done. But we still have some significant work ahead of us on soil remediation. That's shown in the red areas and the yellow areas. The yellow areas being areas where we have not done the full characterization yet to define specifically what needs to be done. But much of the site has been cleared in terms of soil remediation. This is how we saw the site a couple years ago in terms of industrial development. The purple area showing the spaces that we envisioned to become industrial space. And you can see we envisioned about 1,500 acres, a lot of land for industrial. The brown areas were areas that DOE will retain for historic preservation purposes or for surveillance purposes, because we have some long-term surveillance that we will have to do in some of those sites. As we've progressed over the last couple years in our thinking, what this shows is that we're seeing that more of the site is very likely to end up in conservation than what we had originally anticipated. That's because as we've partnered with the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee and got in there and actually started trying to figure out how the site could be developed, we realized that some parts of it are developmentally challenged. They have topography issues, they have wetland issues. There are things that really make development difficult. And so we're anticipating that more space out there is actually going to become green space than what we had anticipated previously. And this is going to open up more areas for greenways. It's going to be beneficial to the National Park Service, who envisions connecting the historic park to surrounding green space. So this expansion of conservation should be a real asset to the site. Shelley, I've lost this again, apparently. Okay, and so where we are, this shows that same slide that you just saw, but the areas that are crossed with 45-degree lines there are the areas that remain to be transferred. So you can see that we've made a lot of progress. 783 acres have been transferred to the site already. And there's probably, depending on how much of the remaining striped area is ultimately transferred, we've probably got on the order of 400 additional acres that will ultimately be transferred. There's in addition to kind of a very rigorous process with the regulator approvals in transferring the property, there's a very prescribed process for transferring safety oversight to the Tennessee Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and we have completed that for 577 of the 783 acres. There's also a process that we go through for reducing the security footprint, which saves us money on our surveillance. So that is where we are at East Tennessee Technology Park in terms of historic preservation and property transfer for reindustrialization.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. One thing that I can add to his presentation, by being fortunate enough to go from Alexandria, Washington to Nevada, ETTP and the presentation he makes today is really a success story, I think, for DOE. And some of the biggest feedback I've heard from other sites I think they've learned a lot from the ETTP project, which Intel has helped them with their cleanup in their contaminated areas, the repurposing, the resale of property back to the public. And I think we kind of sit on an area that's discussed across this country with our success rate. So thank you, Mr. Cook. We'll open the floor to the board members first. Are there any questions to Mr. Cook? Ms. Shoemaker.
I have one question on the slide that you've got up there. I know that's like an artist rendering or something.
Yeah.
What is the structure right in the center? That's not 1600, right? I mean, it's supposed to be gone. In the center of the U?
Yeah, that is an artist rendering, and my suspicion is that was probably intended to be the 1600 building, but it is very much an artist rendering.
Right.
You're right.
Okay.
And 1600 is going away.
Right. But that looked different. I thought maybe it was another structured plan, but okay.
Mr. Tapp. Ms. Hurd.
Can you give me a kind of a quick rundown of what it means to transfer?
Transferring property involves assembling the environmental documentation, so detailed characterization of the property, putting together the package for review and approval by both the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the state of Tennessee. So those approvals take a few months to accomplish, and then for DOE to transfer the property, we have to get concurrences from various program offices at headquarters, and the Secretary of Energy ultimately signs out congressional notifications that kind of completes the process for approval for transfer. So it's a very it's a process that involves a lot of approvals.
Once it's approved, I'm a corporation and I'm going to accept the transfer. Am I buying it from the federal government on a value basis, or is it being handed to me as whatever?
Our partner with the redevelopment of the East Tennessee Technology Park Heritage Center is the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee. Under that regulation I mentioned earlier, any entity can request property, but typically it's been them, and in some cases the city of Oak Ridge, that have requested property from us. And using the authorities that we've been given to transfer this property, we can transfer at no cost, and that has been the case for most of the property out here. Once it's transferred to the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee, they can sell it to developers, and they use the proceeds of that. They're a not-for-profit, and they use the proceeds of that to plow back into the redevelopment of the site.
Mr. John.
Do you have partners that you're working with on the conservation land, or is that strictly like Crowett working with that? How's all that shaking out?
Yeah, as Crowett is our partner in making the economic development things occur, we're hopeful that the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency will be our partner in managing the wildland areas. There is a lot of land out there that's really great habitat for wildlife, presents a lot of recreational opportunity, greenways, etc. So we're in the early discussions with the state of Tennessee. They seem very interested. In fact, I'm meeting with them this month to really look at all the land areas that might be suitable for that green application, if you will. It ultimately could lead to a deed transfer of property to them, which we can also do at no cost, so that they can manage it as another wildlife management area, similar to the arrangement we have in place now for the Black Oak Ridge conservation easement to the north of the site. So we've been looking for a few years, actually, for a partner for the conservation leg of the stool. At one point, Crowett hoped to be able to do that, but what they've realized over the years is that they're doing well to try and just maintain a viable organization by taking our old cleanup land and selling it, and they really can't afford to be in the management of parks type business. They've been helpful. They actually have created a couple of wildlife preserves on the property and some greenways, but it looks like in the future we're going to be working with the state of Tennessee.
Are you familiar with the, I guess it's not called a plan, but it's Legacy Park study that for Oak Ridge that included ETP in opportunities there?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Actually, I was on the steering committee for that effort. And they're very enthusiastic about the potential opportunity out here at East Tennessee Technology Park because it's got space for everything, biking, hiking, hunting, all those things. And its proximity to the national park makes for kind of a natural synergy for that type of use. So.
I attended Carol Evans' presentation at the place my daughter works, ETTP. And it was amazing. I mean, the economic value that some of those recreational facilities out there have.
Yeah.
And the plan, if anybody's really interested, is on the Legacy Parks website. It's a phenomenal presentation. I think it'd be great if they could come and give it here so that everyone here could see what kind of economic opportunities are available at ETTP and other areas around Oak Ridge for recreational. And a mile of creek front has X number of millions of dollars, or riverfront is like $14 million of economic potential or whatever. And so they, reference other places in the United States who have taken properties like this and developed it for recreational type purposes and the economic value that really generated.
Mr. Clark.
Is there any, on the transfer, any potential or for the one receiving the land to guarantee or say they'll create so many jobs for the transfer?
Yeah, in their proposal, they address that as part of their proposal. If they're making one pursuant to that authority I was talking about earlier, they address economic development as part of that, including potential job creation.
There's no set number of jobs that they would potentially create.
There's not a specific requirement.
If I could add to what Steve said, the bottom line, taking a former weapons and Cold War facility and attempting to turn it into something that's, once that mission is ended, something that's useful for the community is a pretty audacious proposition. A lot of states will hand over free land that's greenfield that's never had anything but corn on it to woo industry. So that's what we're competing with. So in order to make it viable for this to move forward, us being able to provide the land for free to Croat is a very helpful thing. Croat then does what they can, and they've begun having some success. There's about 200 jobs out there now, jobs that are unrelated to the cleanup activity. They're there because of the partnership, us giving them largely free land. It's not totally free. All of a sudden somebody has to pay taxes on it. Somebody's got to run off teenagers or whatever. I mean, there are costs that come with owning land, costs that we shed, actually. It's attractive to us too because we stop paying what are called pill payments. We stop having to manage the land. So if they succeed in bringing industries onto the site, I think it's a good deal for everybody. But to have an expectation or a requirement that it only occur when a company promises to create so many jobs is probably not very realistic. Now, that does enter into the picture when those same companies go to the state for incentives. For example, they may get the land at a very good price from Croat. In some cases, they may get it essentially for free from Croat. But when they go to the state and say, I need an exit ramp off the Oak Ridge Turnpike, or I need utility infrastructure or water infrastructure put into the site in order for this to be something I'll proceed with. The state typically does look at how many jobs, what will those jobs pay, and things of those sort. But DOE and CROED aren't so much in that business.
We're having some challenges with the sound.
Okay, I'll try and speak more loudly, Connie.
Mr. Tapp, you have anything further?
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry.
We'll open the floor up to, go ahead, Mr. Rudy.
You might want to point out that one building there was built after, that's a private industry building right there, so that's one of the buildings that was put in and constructed.
Yeah,
for,
foreground.
in the
He's
foreground.
referring to
Yeah.
that and that, both of those.
Those two buildings were constructed for private industry purposes, and those buildings right now, from my understanding, are fully viable. And they actually employ people within the local area to work in those buildings. So that's success stories right there, right in the middle of ETTP.
Any other comments from the board? We'll open the floor up to the guest. Any of the guests in the gallery have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Cook. We'll go to item number 4, public comment period. Ms. Duke.
The public comment period is now open. Are there any members of the public who want to comment? No one has signed up to comment. Okay. All right then. As a Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on Environmental Cleanup, we encourage the community to attend and participate in our meetings. If you are unable to attend, you may send questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate submissions will be read during the public comment period of an ORSSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration as those given in person. Meeting schedules and ways to communicate with the board can be obtained by calling 865-241-4583 or by visiting our website.
Thank you. Item number 5, any call for additions or motions to approve for the agenda tonight? Any requests for new action items? The next meeting will be Wednesday, April the 8th. The presentation will be efforts to assure sufficient waste disposal capacity by Mr. Henry. The issue group will be Baker, Browning, McCurdy, Perez, Shields, Shoemaker, Swidler, and Tapp. Please be early for that meeting. This ends the presentation portion of the meeting. Presenters and subjects experts may depart if you wish. We'll open the meeting.
Year and probably will be here a few more times through the coming year. But tonight I'm going to talk again about all of our efforts that we have to ensure that we have enough disposal capacity to support the ongoing cleanup mission here in Oak Ridge. So I still like your map on the wall better. So if you haven't went back and taken a good look at the map on the wall, that's a great map that kind of shows the different sites. But on this slide, you can see the Oak Ridge Reservation outlined in purple. That's about 34,000 acres, give or take. And we have 3 large sites where most of the activity for DOE and the missions go on. That's out at ETTP. That mission has ended, but EM is fast approaching the cleanup of that site to be able to transition it over to the private sector. This site, the East Tennessee Technology Park, is where the majority of the debris and the waste from the cleanup of that effort has went to our existing environmental management waste management facility. I'll talk a little bit about that. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory is the world-class DOE facility doing world-class research. I think where I saw they were just got the top supercomputer again, so they're always near the top of that list. Y12 National Security Complex has a a vital, ongoing national security mission. And that's the ongoing missions of those two facilities are key to Oak Ridge's continued success. And so we're very fortunate to have those two sites and their ongoing missions. Scattered across the reservation, we do have some waste disposal facilities, and I'll show you a little bit more in detail. We have some sanitary industrial landfills just south of Y12. We have our existing environmental management, waste management facility just to the west of Y12. And this is the preferred location for a new low-level radioactive waste disposal facility that we'll talk about. That's the proposed EMDF. So, you know, we look every year and evaluate both the work that we have going on now and the work we are projecting in the future to make sure we have adequate on-site disposal capacity. We are fortunate to have, as I mentioned, a suite of landfills, starting from a construction demolition debris landfill to industrial landfills that are very similar to municipal waste landfills, moving up to our low-level waste disposal facilities. So right now, with the permitted capacity at our permitted landfills that I'll talk more about, we're in pretty good shape. What we do is we build those out as necessary to support, you know, the next 5 years or the next 10 years, but the capacity is fully permitted for those. Our existing environmental management, waste management facility, it's more than 70% full, and that primarily supported the cleanup of the East Tennessee Technology Park, as I mentioned. The sanitary landfills are permitted by the state of Tennessee. They have operating permits. Our existing low-level radioactive waste disposal facility, environmental management, waste management facility, and I'm going to stop saying that long thing and just say EMWMF, and the new proposed low-level radioactive waste disposal facility, EMDF, are both being done under CERCLA. EMWMF was constructed back in about 2002, became operational. We'd like to have EMDF operational in the mid-2020s. And, you know, one of the things for each tier and each landfill, there are specific waste acceptance criteria on what waste is suitable for that particular facility. And then, you know, to be suitable for disposal there, it has to meet that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So this is Y12. In green, you see our current operating landfills and waste disposal facility. Here in light blue are some closed landfills. Landfill 7, and some of you are going on a tour. I noticed we had a good turnout for the tour, so we'll go by that tomorrow. We'll go by these two facilities and this facility and the proposed location for the new facility tomorrow afternoon. These are about 2 million cubic yards each, as is this, as is the new disposal facility being proposed. They're all about 2 million cubic yards. This is a classified industrial landfill. It takes the same type of waste as landfill 5, except, you know, if there's classified equipment or materials, they can go into landfill 4. And I've got a picture on that in a little bit as well. These are closed and capped, and several of these have been closed and capped for decades. So, as I mentioned, we have TDEC permitted facilities. Anytime we make a change or construct a new phase, there we work with TDEC to get the plans approved. And I'll talk about, we just closed Area 1 on Landfill 4. Prior to doing that, we had to go to the TDEC office, and they had to approve our plans. And then as we're doing the construction, they'll come out and oversee it, and then they approve the construction. So these 3 landfills all have TDEC permits. They all take non-radiological, non-hazardous waste. You know, the construction demolition debris landfill, that's the lowest tier, and that has the most strict waste acceptance criteria. That's generally clean demolition debris, clean soils and rubbles that go into that landfill. The next step up are these 2, landfill 4 and landfill 5. Generally, they're constructed the same. They have the same engineered features, and they take the same type of waste, with the exception, as I mentioned, is if you have classified matter or equipment, it goes into the classified landfill. As Melissa mentioned, we are in the planning process for a new CERCLA low-level waste disposal facility. That public comment period is open at the moment, and it runs through December 10th, and I'll talk more about that later as well. So as we're cleaning up these different sites and the different facilities, we generate primarily debris. When we go to take down a building or clean out a building, you know, pre-demo activities, pre-demolition, we'll go in and remove all the loose equipment, all the loose structure, and that gets disposed of before we actually tear the building down. So when we can, our first choice for removal of that equipment and removal of some of the steel and or the other precious metals is to recycle that material. Now, for DOE's purposes, if it is radiologically contaminated, then we don't recycle it. But where we can demonstrate that the material is clean and can be reused, that's our preference. And that minimizes the amount of waste being disposed of. After that, we start and look at the construction, demolition, debris, and the industrial landfills. And part of our process for any project that we execute here on the Oak Ridge Reservation for cleanup is we work with EPA and TDEC to make sure we're doing the proper sampling and characterization of that project, of the debris, of the equipment, to make sure we have good information that demonstrates that that particular waste stream is suitable for the disposal facility or the landfill that it's going to. If it doesn't meet the WAC for the industrial landfills, if it has radiological contamination, low-level radiological contamination, or hazardous materials that don't require treatment, then it can go into our existing environmental waste management facility. And once we get the new one up and operational, which is necessary for the cleanup of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Security Complex, it will take basically the same types of waste as our existing low-level waste disposal facility. And you know, one thing, and you guys have probably heard this before, but we generate by volume a tremendous amount of debris and soils and waste. Most of the high contamination, and it's not high-level waste, but the higher levels of contamination, we segregate those out, and those are actually shipped off-site, such that the majority, greater than 90% of the hazard goes to the off-site facilities, and the majority by volume and the lower hazard stays here on-site and is effectively disposed of on-site. There will always be, as we move forward, some portion of the waste that gets shipped off-site to different commercial facilities. So as I mentioned, we do have permitted facilities with TDEC, and the capacities are fully permitted, but they're not all fully constructed. So you're seeing a picture of Area 1 on Landfill 4. The permitted capacity of that facility is about 80,000 cubic yards. It's much smaller than the others. We did an expansion of that facility about 2 years ago, and it's separated into Area 1, which was built, I think, back in the 80s, pretty early on, and then the rest of it was built out in the 90s. When we expanded Area 2 to accommodate some of the debris coming from ETTP cleanup, the state wanted us to go ahead and close and cap Area 1. There was a little bit of space left there, but Area 1 wasn't built to the same standards that existed and came into being in the 90s. It wasn't lined, it didn't have a leachate collection system, so we agreed to cap Area 1, and we just finished that this month. And so prior to capping Area 1, you know, we went to TDEC and got approval of the cap, and then as we're executing the work, TDEC comes out and inspects the work that we're doing, and then signs off on the final closure of that. That was about a $2 million project to cap Area 1, and it was a fairly small footprint. So you've heard me mention EMWMF, which is our existing low-level waste disposal facility. It opened, I think it started construction back in the late 90s, and I think opened in 2002. If I got that right, or got that wrong, somebody can tell me. These numbers all jumble together after a while, but it's been operational for about 16 years. The actual footprint of the waste is about 28 acres. When you add in the support facilities and all that stuff, you're getting closer to 60-acre footprint. We did work with EPA and TDEC to get an approval of a design change on the cap, of the conceptual design change on the cap. That's going to allow us to add about another 140,000 cubic yards. And so our capacity for EMWMF has moved from 2.2 million to 2.3 million cubic yards. And we'll see that on the tour. If you haven't seen it and you're going on the tour tomorrow, we'll go by this facility too. And you know, one of the things, this picture here that shows the black membrane, that's what we call an enhanced operational cover. And what we try to do with that is we try to shed clean water away from the landfill as much as possible so that we're not dealing with as much contaminated water. And that's been a real success with the enhanced operational cover, and you'll see that. So I mentioned both the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Y-12 National Security Complex have enduring DOE missions, and they have active facilities, important mission essential facilities, mixed in with a lot of dilapidated, old, contaminated buildings. And the focus starting in 2020 is going to shift from finishing the cleanup at the East Tennessee Technology Park to moving over and cleaning up Y-12 and ORNL. And to be able to do that effectively and in a timely manner, we need the new disposal facility up and operational in about the mid-2020 time frame. I mentioned before the proposed plan is out for that for the new environmental management disposal facility. The public comment period was extended through December 10th, so anyone that wishes to do so can submit public comments through then. We did do, you know, as we worked with EPA and TDEC on moving forward on the new EMDF facility, there was a desire to get some additional characterization data. And so we went out in our first phase of characterization data. We put in 16 well pairs, or it's 8 well pairs, 16 wells. I've got smart folks over there, so if I say something wrong, just, you know, kind of point me in the right directions. But I think it was 16 wells, 8 well pairs. Is that correct? Where we're basically, when we're installing those, we get information on the soils that we go through, the bedrock that we're going through, hydraulic conductivity, and then that gives us also information on where the groundwater is in those wells or piezometers. We have also started working on phase 2 characterization. That work is underway right now, and I've got a graphic that'll show you a little more. The purpose of that information is more to inform the design. It also moves out into the areas where we're going to do support facilities and borrow areas, and gets into the initial seismic testing as well. And we do want an overlap of about 2 years between the operations of EMWMF and EMDF. The purpose of that is you have some waste streams that really need to be on the floor of the cell. So, you know, as you're filling up one disposal facility and you're getting near the top, there are some items you don't want to put on the top. So we need the other one open so we preserve that capability to have floor space to put those types of waste streams that don't belong up near the top. So we're shooting for an overlap of about 2 years. So Bear Creek Valley is right here. Y-12 is over in this general area. If you're familiar with the spallation neutron source, which is an important ORNL user facility, it's located here. And here is the preferred location of the new low-level waste disposal facility called EMDF. And that information is in the proposed plan as well. I mentioned we're doing a lot more outside. This is the footprint of the waste for the new disposal facility. This is the limits of construction, and this is the area where support facilities would be located, and this is a potential borrow area. So initially in phase 1, we focused on putting some wells and piezometers and getting groundwater and surface water data in this general footprint. All these red and all the extra stuff, and down here along the road where we need to reroute the road, this is all information that's being collected. as part of phase 2. So to site this facility at its preferred location, we will have to reroute Bear Creek Road, which is a paved road leading into the Y-12 site, and also our Hall Road. We are very fortunate here on the Oak Ridge Reservation both to have a large reservation and to have dedicated roads that waste from ETTP, waste from ORNL, and waste from Y-12 can travel from the demolition project sites through the Oak Ridge Reservation to these disposal facilities without ever going out into the city of Oak Ridge or onto public roads. As part of the testing, they also take cores, and that allows us to document what's found in the bedrock. I think, and I think it's next, but I've mentioned before, you know, we encourage public comments. That period is open to the 10th. The responses to all of the public comments we received during the proposed plan public comment period will be addressed in what's called a responsiveness summary of the record of decision, and that will be out sometime next year in 2019. So here's a video that says it better than I ever could, so we'll start that.
Option for several key reasons. The Oak Ridge Environmental Management Program's primary mission is to clean up the East Tennessee Technology Park, Y-12 National Security Complex, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Together, these sites house hundreds of facilities that require demolition, which will generate a large amount of contaminated debris and waste. To complete this work, there must be an engineered facility to dispose of this material. In 2002, a disposal facility was constructed for soil and building demolition debris generated primarily from ETTP cleanup. This existing facility will reach its full capacity in the near future, creating the need for additional disposal space to complete cleanup at Y-12 and ORNL. As the EM program planned for future cleanup, it determined that on-site disposal for much of the generated waste was the best option for several key reasons. First, EM has demonstrated that it can ensure safe on-site disposal using engineering features and strict waste acceptance criteria. For more than 15 years, Oak Ridge employees have safely operated its current facility without negatively impacting human health or the environment. Second, on-site disposal avoids huge costs. The cost burden of off-site disposal would slow or pause cleanup operations, impacting local employment and allowing risks to remain that threaten human health and the environment. With on-site disposal, more funds are available for projects that reduce risks and advance cleanup at Y-12 and ORNL. Third, it minimizes transportation risks and uncertainty. On-site disposal only uses a private designated road on DOE land, known as the Hall Road, and it eliminates the risks associated with tens of thousands of truckloads traveling across the country on public highways. Also, on-site disposal is not impacted when other states change policies that could restrict the relocation of waste. When considering on-site disposal options, EM examined 16 sites as potential locations for the new facility. After years of evaluations and reviews, the Department of Energy, the EPA, and the state of Tennessee proposed that the Central Bear Creek Valley option was the best location. This site offers the many criteria needed for this facility and enough space for the remainder of Oak Ridge's cleanup waste and debris. Above all, the EM program will construct and operate this facility safely. The Central Bear Creek Valley site is nearly a mile from the nearest resident. It is separated from the local community by a tall ridge, and groundwater in the area flows away from populated areas. The EM program will only place low-level waste in this facility. The highly contaminated waste is separated at the cleanup sites and shipped off-site for disposal. These off-site shipments material accounts for roughly 10% of the total volume, but contains approximately 90% of the contamination. Additionally, the proposed disposal facility will use several design features to protect the surrounding environment. First, crews will construct 15 feet of protective liners and geologic buffers before waste is placed in the facility. Then, when the disposal facility is full, another 11 feet of clay, liners, and cover soil and grass will be placed over the waste. Together, these features are designed to isolate the waste from rain and groundwater, resulting in an environment protected from contamination. Any water that comes into contact with the waste during disposal operations will be monitored for contamination. If needed, that water will be treated before it is released back into the environment. After the facility is closed and capped, the area will be monitored for as long as necessary to ensure protection of human health and the environment. Oak Ridge's EM program expects the project to be approved in 2019, with the goal of accepting waste at the facility in the early 2020s. This facility will enable the demolition of unneeded, dilapidated, and contaminated facilities at Y12 and ORNL, and support the modernization and mission growth at two of the department's most valuable science and national security sites.
All right. So that's it, except for questions.
Yes, David.
Yes, sir. On the resin that's in your land, over how thick is it and how long will it last?
I'm sorry, you say the
Ed.
geomembrane?
Ed.
Yeah.
Ed. Give him the microphone.
Okay.
Over
I want to say 60
I'm
to 80
sorry.
mil. Is that the geomembrane that's in the conceptual design is 60 or 80 mils thick, and different tests on that material indicate it will last hundreds of years.
Okay.
So there's the literature. I don't know the specifics in the literature. I think there's some that says it's liable to last more than 500 years, but I think hundreds of years is accurate.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want it to be biodegradable. Thank you.
Rudy?
Yes, sir, on page 8, where it shows the liners being installed, basically that's just before the soil is placed on top of it, correct, sir?
Let me,
On page 8. Keep going. One more. Right there, on the left-hand side.
okay, so
Yeah.
what's happening?
I mean, that just shows the liner, but there's going to be soil deposit on top of that. And then,
Actually,
you know.
There's going to be, the 11 feet that we talked about.
Right.
That comes on top of this. Underneath that black fabric
Right.
is about a foot, 1 to 2 foot of clay.
Yeah.
And that may be part of that, maybe a foot of that may be part of the 11 feet that goes on later.
Right.
But this
right.
is a temporary
Right, it's just
operational.
temporary right there because
Correct.
you don't want any
Just to
rain
shed the
impacting
water.
and go in there, correct,
Right.
sir. In relationship to the EMDF and EMWMF, where's the walk-in pits located? Is it between those two and that won't have any negative impact?
The walk-in pits.
Yeah, because that was capped and closed.
So I'm familiar with the Bear Creek Burial Grounds. Is that
Right.
is that what
No.
we're talking about?
No, the walk-in pits area.
Okay, it's part of the Bear Creek Burial Grounds.
Yeah, is that
It's in
still
between.
west? Oh, it's in between
Yeah,
the
so
two?
if you,
Okay.
let me see if my green pointer will reach that far. Let me see if I can see.
I mean, that's not going, basically,
So-
you had to site the new one farther away from the current M-Wolf to get away from the walk-in pits area.
That wasn't a factor. I mean, we couldn't site it in that location, but
Right.
if you look back here,
Yeah.
the existing one's in this area. Here
Right.
are the Bear Creek Burial Grounds, and the new one is about here. So the,
Right, so it's a fair distance away from the walk-in pits area.
Correct.
That's been capped already.
There
Yeah.
have been some RCRA caps placed on that. There's still, future cleanup actions that'll be
Sure.
associated with that whole area.
Sure, okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Richard?
Brian, you mentioned the debris that you were holding off, that you, for whatever reason, that you don't want to put on top in the existing, and you're waiting for the new one, kind of put it at the bottom. Is that debris? Is that waste being stored right now, currently, or are they waiting for the landfill, the new landfill, to be built before they continue with whatever this debris is?
So right now, for EMWMF, we do have a lot of floor space that's unused in cell 6. We constructed cell 6 3 to 5 years ago. I don't remember the exact time, but we haven't. We've just started putting waste in cell 6, so the floor of that will last us for some time. So our plan is to, when we run out of floor space in EMWMF, to have floor space in EMDF. And that's generally really large, heavy pieces of equipment. But we currently do have floor space because the cell 6 has not been used very much.
Thank you.
Back to the caps that you were talking about on the older burial grounds. Are they closed? There's no intention to disturb them? Are they done? We're not going to try to go back to them and.
So that decision has yet to be made. That's we have decades of cleanup left here in Oak Ridge, and we will be having those discussions on the Bear Creek Burial Ground with both EPA and TDEC on what has to be done there. What's the final remedial action for that area? But that's sometime in the future. We do monitor we monitor groundwater and surface water throughout the reservation and throughout Bear Creek Valley.
And also, you mentioned on the runoff for EMWMF, you treat it if necessary. And what constituents are you looking for, and what sort of treatment?
So we have what's called the Liquid Gaseous Waste Operations Facility at ORNL that treats liquid waste, liquid water that has radioactive or chemical hazardous constituents in it. So at EMWMF over the years, we had a long list of things we monitored, both radiological and chemical constituents. I think within the last year or two, based on 15 years of not finding a lot of them, we routinely sample for a much smaller list that we expect to find. And then every year or every 2 years, we again do the full suite of things. But it's both radiological and chemical. If we exceed the discharge criteria, that is trucked. Right now, all of the leachate that's collected.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.